So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House. We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie.
It's like you've made it very clear, Michael, all the way through this, that you said from the very beginning that you're innocent and that you were framed. Are the people who are involved in this capable of doing something like that? Yeah. All of this. What is it that you...
My father is in the CIA.
Your father is in the CIA?
Yeah, my father is in the CIA. In fact,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is he still alive?
No, he died, didn't he?
He died?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you know stuff? Did your father tell you stuff?
Not directly, no, but...
So that's Michael Kelley speaking to Crime World's Patrick O'Connell last year. Mm-hmm. The reason we're playing that, obviously, is because Michael Kelley has been rearrested in connection with the murder of Mike Gaine, the Kerry farmer. What happened this morning and what have the guards said about it so far?
Yeah, so guards put out a statement, as they usually do when they arrest someone for a high-profile murder like that. But I guess we all straight away knew who it was because, as you said, Michael Kelley has been arrested before, and it seems that a warrant was obtained yesterday for his arrest and questioning, and he was arrested around 7:30 a.m. this morning. This is, as we've already said, the second time that he's been arrested. He was arrested in May, shortly after the remains of Mike Gaine were discovered on his farm. So usually when they arrest a person for a second time, they have new information to put to them. Yeah, so, I mean, that is what we're hearing, is that they're arresting him in order to put in for new information that they've received, and that would be, he would be asked about that. Because he's been arrested in connection with the murder, he probably has basically 24 hours in custody. He'd be questioned. They put a series of things to him. They can't just sort of harass him. They have to have something new to put to him if you're rearresting him. Yeah. And then at that point, then they make a decision if somebody is to be charged or released without charge. And obviously, Michael Kelley has been through all of this before because he was arrested and then released without charge. Yeah. Now that's Pat, obviously we played at the start, Pat talking to Michael Kelley where in Tralee, where he ultimately ended up, I suppose, in the months after the murder. Yeah. Now, he was one of these, I suppose, unusual guys. I mean, look, an unusual guy for sure. Yeah. That, I suppose, often when people are arrested in connection with crimes, they hide their faces, coming out there, do anything but speak. But Michael Kelley spoke again and again to the media about the case. What do we know, I suppose, about Michael Kelley? So we know that Michael Kelley, he was in Ireland around 7 years, and then he was invited to live on a house on Mike Gaine's land. Mike Gaine actually wasn't living where his farm is. He was living like a little bit down the road with his wife. So there was a empty house there on the property. So he was invited to live there, and he'd been living there for I think it was a couple of years, wasn't it?
3 years.
3 years, yeah. And he'd been obviously doing work for Mike Gaine. But it seems that he had previously he said he was previously in the army in America, that he'd come over here. He kind of gave this interview where he had these kind of bizarre theories about far-right elements, that there was, didn't want him there. And there was obviously reasons that he left. He applied for asylum here as well, and he was refused because obviously America isn't an unsafe country.
No, and he sort of spoke about repeatedly, he probably spoke about this bit more than anything, about why he had to leave the US. And the narrative he had was that he sort of got in dispute with these alt-right guys. It was how he describes them. Yeah. He thinks of himself as a patriot, doesn't he, Michael Kelley? And he served in the US Defence Forces, though there was some dispute about
what had happened there exactly.
Yeah.
And he seems to claim that he was being targeted with violence. Was he saying shots were fired at his house, or his dog was threatened and things like that, and that they wanted to get him, and that he subsequently went to Ireland, and he basically said the threats were following him over there.
Yeah.
But also it does seem to be relevant that there was a family breakdown before he left the US.
Yeah, because he seemed to actually suggest that criminal elements may have followed him here and been responsible for Mike Gaine's death. He said that to Pat O'Connell because he's obviously completely denied any involvement, and that's why he keeps giving these interviews. But yeah, there was also court documents. Obviously in America, as you said before, court documents are a lot more accessible than they are here. So the breakdown of his marriage was laid bare, really. And, obviously he had made bizarre claims about his wife, that she was some kind of...
Well, he said she was practicing witchcraft.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
The most unusual of them.
Yeah, exactly. And, a judge had found that he had difficulty distinguishing fact from fiction as part of this case. He said that wasn't true in his interview with us. So, there seems to be, I don't know if he had children. I think he might be estranged from them as well. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff that came out about his family background too. But, even if there's any kind of questions over someone's character, he's still seen as innocent in terms of the allegations against him about Mike Gaine, and he's been very strong in that. And even he went as far as to tell us that, he said anybody is capable of harming anyone depending on the circumstances. And Pat said, but you didn't harm Mike Gaine. And he said, no, absolutely not.
Exactly. So he landed over here. I mean, Mike Gaine, obviously as a person, part of the reason there was such huge interest and such an outpouring of sort of grief in Kerry is because Mike Gaine was a particularly sort of popular, decent farmer. And he seems to have taken Kelley in. Now, as you said, he's living in this, I suppose it's a house, but it's sort of run down enough, I think. He's... there's no, I don't know if there was electricity and things like that. There may well have been electricity, but it wasn't a glamorous lifestyle. And he's mostly helping Mike Gaine out with sort of handyman and stuff on the farm. He has a big farm, Mike Gaine, about 1,000 acres. So there's a good bit of work to be done, and Mike Gaine doesn't seem to have been charging him much money or anything like that.
Yeah.
And obviously, Michael Kelley is waiting for his asylum to be processed. Wouldn't have access to a load of money, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So everybody knew Michael Kelley in the area because it's rural part, and anybody, I suppose, any American or non-local would kind of stand out. But Mike Gaine goes missing. It's in March, and straight away there's big concerns for his safety. Because it's out of character, really.
Yeah, so he was last seen, he was obviously big into rally driving. They actually held a rally in his honour just in January, and he was also obviously known to go to the cattle marts all the time, so he was really well known in the area. And I think he'd been at a cattle mart very shortly before his disappearance, and then the morning of his disappearance, I think it was March 20th last year, so we're approaching 12 months now, and he was seen in a shop, a centre in Eimear. That was the last CCTV footage of him. I think he went in to get phone credit or something, and then his bronze coloured RAV4 he drove that back and he parked on his property, and that was the last that was ever heard of him. I suppose what kind of raised concerns as well, he obviously never came home, and his wife called Gardai, but also they found his belongings, his phone and his wallet in his car, which obviously suggests that he wasn't planning to go anywhere. So there was massive searches, obviously, because as you said, it's a 1,000-acre farm. There's a lot of rough terrain around. There's obviously a lot of volunteers, people that liked Mike and people that were very concerned. We're looking as well as all of the different elements of the Gardaí, of search volunteers, search groups. And this went on for 8 weeks. And they actually the tragic nature of how it ended up was that the whole time he was 50 yards from his car in a slurry tank.
Yeah, so this is the most, I suppose, the sort of macabre element of it. And also it also raised a lot of questions about that guard operation in the aftermath, some of which were spoken about by Drew Harris, the commissioner at the time. But basically, his remains were found in this slurry tank, and they were found in the most gruesome way because this slurry was being spread on the land, and the person doing that, found parts of
it got lodged. Yeah, the thing got stuck, and then when they went to look, there was little bits of, was it bone fragments?
Yeah.
Caught. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, we're still not clear if he had been dismembered. I mean, certainly his body was in parts, but that's, I suppose, certainly what
Yeah.
the guards believe.
Yeah, our colleagues are reporting today in the Independent that he was dismembered. The Gardaí believe he was murdered in the cattle shed and dismembered and discarded in the slurry tank. The slurry tank had been searched, but I suppose, given the nature of the dismemberment, these body parts were in the actual slurry, and they had been spread on and it was obviously, as you said, a family member and a contractor were in the middle of spreading slurry, and it got jammed in the machine. So the area had been searched, but I suppose once the parts were found, that's when Gardaí, I suppose, became to this theory that they believed that he had to have been. I know there was, just lots of different people have different knowledge of farming machinery, and some people were trying to suggest that other things could have happened. But I think the guards' theory seems to have landed on that he was dismembered and then put into the tank.
Yeah, and of course, it's not known if the body parts were there when the search occurred, or were they deposited there in the aftermath. Of course, that's just not known, and
no.
Some of the criticism of the guards has been very strong, but there's been no report that we can look at and say what went right and what went wrong.
No.
Either way, Mike Gaine certainly was had it is believed, I think, by all concerned, that he certainly was murdered.
Yeah, and it was actually like the murder it was upgraded to a murder investigation before he was found, actually, because it was obviously whatever investigations Gardaí had done, there was no sign of him. There was nothing, as I said, his belongings were there. He obviously hadn't used any of his accounts or anything like that, and I suppose the nature of his disappearance being so out of the ordinary. I think it was always I remember doing this podcast with Nicola very shortly after his disappearance, and there was a little bit of confusion, like could something have an accident have befallen him? But because they searched the area so thoroughly, I think from the get-go there was always concern that this is going to be suspicious, and that's how it turned out.
Yeah, because it's a very complicated murder case. Now, if you look at a lot of the murders that have been solved in recent times, even if you look at, for example, the Richard Satchwell case, ultimately, even CCTV played a role in that, because they checked that, when he was leaving the house and when he wasn't. But in the case of Mike Gaine, it's in a very rural part of the country, so there's not going to be CCTV around. There obviously is that final image from when he's buying the phone credit, but there's nothing else. There's not a lot of phone information because Mike Gaine's phone was found in his car, so they couldn't track him that way. There's no witnesses. I mean, it's in a very isolated part. There's nobody walking by and seeing stuff, and without then human witnesses, I suppose, people saying stuff, it becomes really, really complicated. Nonetheless, straight away the guards, as soon as the body parts were found, or within a number of hours, Michael Kelley was arrested.
Yeah, and the talk had kind of swirled, I suppose, even before the body parts were found, because, as you said, it's a very rural area, but that road would have been quite known, and there had been appeals looking for information. Anyone with dash cam, anyone that would spot a car, like they would all kind of know. Like that traffic, obviously there could be, it's Kenmare is a big tourist spot, but a lot of the traffic kind of would have been probably recognised. So I think that was another thing that they started to believe, that Michael Gaine may not have not left the farm, because there hadn't been any suspicious activity in terms of cars being moved or anything like that. So I suppose the theory kind of started to swirl that it was someone, who had access to the farm, and maybe something, someone that and I think that's why there was rumours going around, and obviously then Michael Kelley was arrested as you said, quite shortly afterwards.
So he was arrested, he was released without charge, and as I said, normally people in that circumstance, they just automatically, instinctively keep their head down. But that wasn't the case for Michael Kelley, and he spoke to various reporters over various times, including ourselves, but also to RTE and the Star, and I think we're the first to speak to him. Now, he's got a consistent story that he has denied it from day one, but he has spoken a lot.
Yeah.
Now, the guards, presumably, he's by all accounts, and we weren't there, but it seems to be everybody agrees that he spoke to the guards, not just when he was arrested. Before that, he had spoken to them, not formally under caution or anything like that. But it was always said that he answered every question that was put to him.
Yeah.
So what we're hearing is obviously that the guards have further information, and what in cases like this, and we're supposing, but because we don't know and we're not there, but it tends to be the case that they will put people's previous statements to them, and they may put other statements, other things that they found, and see if there's a contradiction, or if there is a contradiction, how that could be answered.
Yeah.
Now, people are going to ask, people are arrested all the time. Why are you naming this guy, and why do you not name everybody? So
I feel like I'm in school now.
You can explain it, because he was already named by the time he came in. So I went through the process. You can describe, even not knowing what was said, you can describe it to us.
Yeah, well, I suppose, we don't name, like we have in the past, I suppose, this is going off topic now, but just to explain it, we have in the past named somebody when we know that they're probably, this is not in this case, but generally with us, we've kind of only ever named people in the past when we thought that, we've been told they're going to be charged, or when someone has significant criminal past to kind of warrant them being named. So that would happen in the gangland cases where someone is already convicted of really serious crimes. So we think it's okay to name them then because of their reputation. That's not the case in this one. But the reason in this one, I suppose, is because he identified himself as a suspect. So they're the only really cases. Like if somebody else who, has come forward as a suspect in a case, unless those circumstances are in play, you wouldn't name them before they appear in court. But I suppose in this case, Michael Kelley had, I think it was the Star, she said, approach him first, and they asked him for interview. And we do that when people are arrested on suspicion of something like this. We can often go up and try and speak to them, and usually they might not speak to us. But in this case, he decided to speak and said, yes, I was arrested, I didn't do it. The Gardaí had the wrong man. So, and then he proceeded to do interviews. So I suppose there's no privacy issue because he's already identified himself as a suspect.
Yes. Now that exactly, it's if you are arrested on murder, on suspicion of murder, and you're released without charge, the newspapers might say, or a lawyer who's helping a media organisation might say, well, this person hasn't been charged, and therefore they've a right to privacy that they were arrested in this case. But Michael Kelley hasn't sought that route. He's I suppose done interviews, and therefore is not a fully private person.
No. So
in a case like this, the clock ticks once they're brought into custody, and they obviously be given breaks, but basically the guards have 24 hours to question them and then make a decision. Yeah.
They do, and they might take the breaks into account, but other than that, they'll have to make a decision. And as I said earlier, was arrested at 7:30 this morning, so that would give it tomorrow. Like maybe it might go a little bit later in the morning if he's had breaks, but other than that, they'll have to have a decision made. And I suppose it is the second time that he's been arrested, so generally they'll obviously have a plan around what they wanted to put to him, and it might be a bit more kind of direct or specific information.
Yes, because obviously the investigation will have gone on in the meantime between the first arrest and the second arrest, and they'll have collected what information they could. And we don't know what that is. It's you have a sense of some of it, but certainly not all of it.
No.
Okay, well, we'll come back to this story tomorrow when we find out what happens next.
Absolutely. Thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Eimear.
Have you checked out our new website, crimeworld.com, where you'll find ad-free exclusive content, including our new series, The Science of Fear, about the rise and fall of Daniel Kinahan's right-hand man, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. Subscribers can listen to all 9 parts, but for those of you not yet signed up, here's an extract from part 1. It's July 25th, Ipswich Crown Court. 3 of Ireland's most notorious criminals flicker onto the courtroom screens from prisons across England. Thomas Bomber Kavanagh appears on Zoom from Belmarsh Prison, looking surprisingly tanned and trim in a dark grey t-shirt. Beside him on the screen, his lieutenants Gary Flash Vickery and Daniel Canning appear from other prisons, fidgeting in their seats. In contrast, Kavanagh sits bolt upright, with arms folded across his chest, and listens intently in an interview room with bathroom blue walls. As a female prison guard nips in and out of Kavanagh's interview room, the exasperated judge, Justice Martin Levitt, stops proceedings to scold, "We'll just wait for Belmarsh to stop coming in and out of the room because it's interrupting us yet again." Over the morning, there are various arguments set out by wigged barristers who call each other "my learned friend" in clipped British accents. But the outcome is clear. Kavanagh has 3 months to pay back more than €1.26 million in criminal assets, or face another 12 years in prison. One by one, the court strips him of his assets: luxury watches, designer clothes, equity in a Majorcan property, rental income, cash seized by police, and even the cost of a family holiday to Cancun. And the biggest blow, his half share of a fortified Tamworth mansion, the marble-floored stronghold where he reigned like an Italian mob boss in the English Midlands. The court was told his wife, Joanne Byrne, the sister of David Byrne, who was murdered in the Regency, had not responded to a court notice. Kavanagh, sitting at a wooden desk in Belmarsh, betrays no sign of emotion at the prospect of losing the family home. But behind that blank stare is a man who once weaponised fear with precision. Police wiretaps revealed a mobster, almost scientific, in his obsession with torture, casually calculating exactly how much pain he could inflict, terrifying men into loyalty without paralysing them completely. Britain's National Crime Agency finally brought him down, jailing him for 26 years. Now, here in Ipswich Crown Court, they're dismantling what's left of his empire. And then, one final twist. It appears that Bomber couldn't do his time. In a scheme that wouldn't have been out of place in a Guy Ritchie movie, Kavanagh tried to shave some time off his 21-year sentence for drug smuggling by orchestrating a plot from behind bars. Hoping to dupe authorities into handing him a lighter sentence, he tried to lead the National Crime Agency officers to a weapons stash. Instead, he was rumbled and slapped with another 6 years. We spoke to some of the NCA officers who were involved in taking Bomber down, including one who was tasked with following the money. It was a job that took him across international borders.
This particular case, I would say, was complex because we had overseas assets in Ireland and in Spain, Lanzarote, and there was also the inquiries when pulling together the investigation as well. Because there was Dutch hauliers involved. There was drugs were coming in, say, from the Netherlands. They were coming in from Spain. So there was quite a lot of international partners we were involved with when we were pulling this together. So the actual value of the drugs, which was agreed on between the prosecution and defence, eventually was 10,470,833, and that was it was 3,750,833 of cannabis and 6,720,000 pounds worth of cocaine. The benefit figure for Thomas, with all the other assets involved, we agreed on just over 12 million of benefit from his criminality. And we started off somewhere around 15, 16 million. So we've come down about 4 million. And the majority of that is the difference in the value of the drugs. Knowing the significance of him, it was really great result to get him convicted and now to get the confiscation order against him as well and have that benefit hanging over him.
Officers who went through the rows of designer gear in Bomber's gated mansion were astonished at the sheer scale of luxury goods. The drug proceeds had been splurged on luxury and security in almost equal measure. The place was sealed, reinforced doors, bulletproof glass, and cameras covering every approach. Inside was a display of wealth that would rival that of Imelda Marcos. Money was lavished on Moncler jackets, a shoe collection worthy of a Saudi princess, and a watch collection fit for a Premier League dressing room. The list goes on. 30 pairs of identical Armani jeans, Gucci labels, a collection of handbags that a Kardashian would be proud of. This was how the cartel's profits were laundered, through spending sprees and rolls of cash handed across the shop counters in Harrods. The definition of ill-gotten gains was hanging in wardrobes in his luxury mansion in Tamworth. Cartel members know the risk of peddling drugs across international borders, but when officers start rifling through their six-figure wardrobes, confiscating their luxury watches and handbag collections, it does hit a nerve.
A lot of criminals are quite happy, getting imprisoned for the crime is part of the job. But when you actually say, now we're going to take all your assets, that's when it gets personal, because that's the reason they're committing crime, is for their lifestyle. That's their job. And we are then taking it all away or getting an order to take it away. So that's when it can get quite personal.
The court's inventory of Bomber's lavish spending gave an inkling into just how far removed he'd become from the day-to-day drug trade. He oversaw the delegation of smuggling routes, of finance and of enforcement to trusted lieutenants. The proceedings in Ipswich Crown Court didn't just mark the fall of Thomas Bomber Kavanagh's personal empire, they also signalled something far bigger. Bomber's collapse marks the first true fracture in what had long looked like an impenetrable underworld machine. The cartel's chief strategist, the man who kept its international supply lines running smoothly, had finally been taken down. Seen as untouchable for years, his sentence for importing tens of millions of pounds of drugs was a major shot across the bow of the Kinahan cartel. And just 2 weeks after Kavanagh's sentencing, the United States raised the stakes.
And so today, the United States Department of State is pleased to announce a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to the financial disruption of the KTCO or the arrest and convictions of its leaders, Christopher Vincent Kinahan, Daniel Joseph Kinahan, and Christopher Kinahan Jr.
You've been listening to an extract from our 9-part series, The Science of Fear, about the rise and fall of Daniel Kinahan's right-hand man, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. To listen to all 9 parts, log on to crimeworld.com and hit subscribe.